Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books down from the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today is Tony Pasculi.
Thanks, Tom.
Today we're talking about one of our favorites, I know we're both Heinlein fans, but certainly one of my favorites, Starship Troopers, or at least it was one of my favorites.
What
ranked
happened?
it among my favorites. It has been a while since I visited this book. I had no idea how much of it I had forgotten. Not that I didn't enjoy the read, but I think some of the luster might have worn off in the decade or so since I last visited it.
Well, let's talk about what you like first, because we want to know why it's a favorite, and also it's obviously it's Heinlein, so that's a good thing.
That's a good place to start.
Yes.
It is Heinlein, with surprisingly little sex for Heinlein.
That's true.
Yeah. It is. I mean, what's not to like? You have an advanced Federation society. You have interstellar conflict. You've got powered armor. You've got starships. You've got alien creatures and evil versus good. Just lots of all the good sci-fi tropes are here.
You got a bug hunt.
Yeah.
I don't know this, but I think this is the first popular use of powered armor in science fiction. It's certainly the thing that every other mention of powered armor refers back to Starship Troopers that I can think of. I mean, maybe someone else did it first, but I don't know. If they did, I don't know who it was.
This is certainly one of the better efforts, I think, as well. But yeah, it's fun, and it starts, our protagonists are high school kids, and Johnny ends up enrolling not because he wants to enroll, but because he happens to go with his friend to enroll. Mm-hmm. And the girl that he's hot for shows up to enroll as well. So, he's like, okay, I'll enlist.
That's a theme Heinlein comes back to again and again and again in his work is, people sign up to fight and die, not because they have a great attachment to their principles, but because they don't want to look like less than a man in front of the people that matter to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that certainly happens in Time Enough for Love. Lazarus Long, who should know much better that throwing his life away on a battlefield is not worth it. And yet when the woman he loves says, oh, and she just signs right up.
Glory Road.
Glory Road, yeah.
But yeah, this, I kind of like, what I remember liking about this book is I really agreed with his vision of what a society could be. And I think this is a pretty good vision of what a society could be. Now, the details, it turns out, were pretty fuzzy in my mind, but I still, by and large, think that I like this. So military service is the one and only route, and successful, honorable military service is the one and only route to having a franchise. And we're left a lot in the dark about what you need a franchise for. It seems like most people get by just fine without it.
Yeah, it's the vote. It's the ability to vote. That's it.
But that's it, right? Yeah. I mean, you can own property, you can run businesses, you can do anything except vote with the franchise. And the service is so optional that you can literally walk away at any time, and the repercussion is you can't come back.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, and when they get sworn in the first time, then the guy says, all right, you have 48 hours to come back. Do you know what happens if you don't come back? I'm like, we'll get arrested? He's like, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nobody's going to come looking for you. Nobody will care. The only thing is you will never be allowed to sign up.
Yeah. So an important caveat to you have to serve in the military to get the vote is that you have to not only serve the military, but leave the military. You cannot vote while you're in.
Yep.
So it's not a military ocracy. I don't know. I'm sure there's a better word for that. It's not a military dictatorship. The government is not run by the military, but it is voted for by people who are ex-military.
Yep, all veterans. The entire voting populace are veterans.
Yeah.
Which I did not remember. I thought that service was a route to citizenship, but apparently it is in fact the route.
It's the route, and it's interesting, and a lot of people object to this. A lot of people call this book fascist, which I think is unfair because I don't think Heinlein is advocating for this. I think what he is advocating for is that there be some sort of discriminant on who can vote and who can't. And the particular one that he's laying out here in this thought experiment is that people who are willing to sacrifice their well-being for their country should have more of a say than people who are free riders on that country and are not willing to sacrifice for it.
Which isn't to say that you don't have free riders make it successfully through the military.
Yes,
and that's
absolutely.
something they address. The Mobile Infantry, where our hero is stationed, is an exception to that.
Yeah.
Right? There are no non-combat jobs in the Mobile Infantry.
Yeah. The chaplain, the medics,
chaplain,
they drop
the cooks,
with everybody. Everybody drops.
The leaders are on the front line,
Yeah.
which I've always thought was actually a pretty bad idea just from a military, and especially when they go into the chronic shortage of officers. I'm like, well, maybe.
Maybe if they weren't on the planet getting blown up. Yeah.
Maybe so.
But I mean, it's obviously in the context of this book, very good for unit cohesion, and that's a trade-off. Do you want to take, because the flip side of that is Vietnam, where this is a stat I heard in a movie, and I have no idea if it's accurate, that the average lifespan of a fresh second lieutenant dropped into a hot LZ is 17 seconds. Yeah. That these people who went to officer candidate school who had no military experience other than boot camp, and then they just went to college, and they got their commission, and they got dropped into the shit and just had no idea how to survive, how to lead, how to do anything, and they just died. Mm-hmm. A lot of fragging happened in Vietnam for that reason, because it's like, this guy's going to get us killed. So, yeah. So certainly one advantage is that, you know these people, you trust these people, they're taking the same risks, they're making the same sacrifices. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, something that really struck me as I was reading it through this time, we've talked in the past about the movie, and we've in very dismissive terms.
Yes.
There's a lot more of the book in the movie than I remembered being there. I mean, now, again, the overall premise of the movie is in no way, shape, or form the overall premise of the book, but there are so many details that they kept intact.
Yes.
The names of the characters, the promotion system, the Fubar scenario when they tried to attack Klindathu, the extreme measures they went to try and capture a brain. I mean, over and over, I'm reading these things. It's like, okay, well, they kept that for the movie. They kept that for the movie. So how did the movie end up being so wrong?
Because they kept the superficial details, which were basically irrelevant and not the heart of the book, which is what it's all about, especially for Heinlein. They didn't. Here's the thing: they didn't keep. They didn't keep the race of the main character. Johnny Rico is Filipino living in Argentina, and they cast Casper Van Diem, who's Dutch, I'm going to guess. Yeah. The farthest thing you can get from Filipino. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of whitewashing in that movie, just a little bit, though.
Yeah. It's interesting. Heinlein gets shredded on a regular basis for being a out of touch, sexist, misogynist. I don't know if he's a racist. Yeah. I think he's actually, this book was written in 1959. I think for his time, he was incredibly progressive. One of his things was that he was always trying to examine and deflate cultural norms that didn't have any kind of basis in rational thought. They were just like, this is the way we've always done things. And he's like, well, what if we didn't? What if we did something else? What if marriage wasn't just a man and a woman? What would it look like then? What if, what if the protagonists of all our books weren't just a bunch of white people from the United States? So he's pretty cosmopolitan here and pretty even-handed in terms of sexuality, too. I think I don't think there are any mobile infantry. There are no women in the mobile infantry, but he goes out of his way to say that they're the best combat pilots. In fact,
the women get slotted for Starship for pilot duty because they have better reflexes than men.
Yeah, which is interesting. I have no idea if that holds water. But, I mean, he's trying to elevate them.
Well, I love the fact that he has absolutely no problem exploring that.
Yeah,
whatever. You absolutely want the best candidate for the job doing that job.
Yeah. Although it seems like mobile armor would be a good equalizer. I don't know why women can't fight in mobile armor. Yeah, so.
He actually talks in the context of the book in one of the history and moral philosophy classes, which, sidebar, I had no recollection whatsoever how much of this book happened inside the classroom.
A lot.
There are like 3 chunks of the book, and by chunks I mean chunks of the book, that are just extended lectures and discussions, classroom discussions. And a couple of them happen in high school, and one of them happens in boot camp. But one of the points the instructor brings up in the high school is, why can only veterans vote? Why can only veterans have the franchise? And after letting the students flail around for a while, it's like, it's a trick question. There is no right answer to it. We do it because it's the way we have done things. It's not that we think it's any better or any worse. It's just a system that evolved and we've never challenged.
Yeah, although it is something, I mean, he's definitely choosing to explore. I mean, who deserves to get the vote? Everybody's heard the famous thing about Rome and bread and circuses for the masses. And as soon as people, this is actually a direct quote from somewhere in Heinlein, I don't know if it's this book or somewhere else, as soon as people realize that they can vote themselves more money, that's the end. That's the end of your democracy, because they will just vote and vote and vote until they have all the money, and then there's nothing left. And
Well, and I find it odd, at least in this book, we're given that that's what a franchise gets you, but we're not given any examples of it being used, right? We don't have any election stories going on here.
That's a good point.
We don't have any politicking stories going on here beyond the level of who gets promoted now that, Bob's dead. So it's almost completely tangential. Why would anyone want to go? He doesn't give us a reason. Well, he gives us reasons, but the reasons are all very abstract and very higher tier. We don't see any practical application of this is what the elected officials look like under this, and this is what the election process looks like under this.
I don't remember if there's any discussion in the book of whether you have to be a franchise citizen to run for office.
I don't recall either. I was actually wondering about that very thing. If it was in there, it was small, and I skipped over it. It just didn't stick.
That would be interesting.
That would change stuff a little bit. But.
Yeah, a little bit. But not entirely, because presumably people who of veteran status would be more appealing to veterans as candidates. Yeah, it's like, well, this person knows.
And again, the recruitment the recruitment officer was just, it was so adorable. The lengths he went to try and dissuade them from signing up.
Yeah.
And then talking about, Mobile Infantry is an exception, but in the other branches, it did not matter who you were. It did not matter what your capabilities or limitations or intellect were. They would find, if they had to create a job for you, they would create a job so that you could serve.
Yeah.
Because it was your right to serve if you chose to.
Yeah. That's interesting also. Yeah. You have a right to serve. Which, again, is tied to the franchise, because you can't just say, nope, you're not qualified. You're not qualified to serve, therefore not qualified to vote. That would be pretty extreme. Yeah. You mentioned the lengths he goes to dissuade people from signing up. One of the lengths is that this recruiter has lost an arm and a leg in combat, and that is very, very visible because he's literally missing an arm and a leg, and he talks to these kids. And later they see him out shopping, and he's fully functional.
He's got all his high-end prosthetics.
Yeah, and he says, I don't wear these for recruiting because I want to be a horror show for you guys. But in daily life, come on, that's ridiculous. Yeah. Fine. Yeah.
There's a quote in here. So we have 3 central friends, right? We've got
Johnny Rico,
Carmen, and Doogie Howser.
Yeah.
I forget his name off.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, there's a quote here.
One.
It's like, little Carmen was so ornamental that you never thought about her being useful.
That is not a phrase that has aged well. Yeah.
No.
Although this is something I meant to say the last time we were talking about Heinlein. Again, people slam him for being sexist a lot. And I don't think he is. I think he values women. I think he is, the phrase I would use is an enthusiastic heterosexual.
Okay.
And so he appreciates women for what makes them women, and And so he's into chivalry and he's into noblesse oblige and he's into all of that. And it's not that women aren't capable. It's just that men, should be a little bit more capable so they can take care of their women. I don't think it's meant to be patronizing. I think it comes off that way. I think he's just like, vive la difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but that said, yeah, again, 1959 and, he couldn't write that line today.
Yeah, there are things that just don't age well.
And also that line is in the mouth of a high school student. So
that is true. That is true. So back to the theme of, oh my God, there's so much. So this is line from page 102. This is 37% of the way through the book, according to my Kindle. I'm not going to talk much more about my boot training. 37% of the way through, he says, and that's all we've been talking about so far.
Yeah.
And then we make it to page 135, which is 49% of the way through the book. Eventually we graduated. The first half of the book is either high school or boot camp. And there's not a lot of differentiation, actually. I mean, of course, boot camp, there's all the things that you imagine. But there's a moment in there, and this is a priceless deviation from the movie. They're doing the knife training. And Sergeant Zim, right, is their instructor, her instructor Zim.
Yeah.
Didn't that go on to become isn't there an Alien Zim animated?
Invader Zim.
Invader Zim, yeah. Not that guy.
Unrelated.
But anyway, so in the movie, one of the boots says something like, what's the point of having a knife fight in a button war? And then the instructor throws and sticks the guy's hand to a wall. It's like, you can't push the button. Well, in the book, that comes up, you've got a boot who can't hit the target, not just to make the mistake, he can't hit the target with a knife, and he's complaining about, why do I need to have a knife? Why does this even matter? And the instructor stops the drill, and they sit down and they have this philosophical discussion. And after this goes on for pages, and he's like, you really should have covered this in your history and moral philosophy class, but if you've got more questions, we should go and talk to, and he gives them a list of officers to go talk to. So just shut down the whole battalion's training so we can sit here on the field and discuss this philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. So you're a teacher, so you know this. Sometimes you have a lesson that you want to impart, and you'll get to it at some point, and then someone will say something, and you will take that moment, you will seize that moment to go, aha, now is the time when we're going to do this because it's directly and immediately relevant.
Yep.
And it feels to the kids like, what is this weird detour? But it was always something you were going to do, and this is just the moment that crystallizes it. Yeah.
Yep.
So I buy that. That
well,
rings to me.
It's just a lovely, and there are moments that go through there when they're in the training and they're doing absolutely everything that you see in any movie about going through Army training. They're hiking through the mud, they're freezing, they're polishing their boots, they're being waken up in the middle of the night, and they stop to have a discussion. Or they really emphasize teamwork and camaraderie. So they wake them up in the middle of the night, they march them 20 miles out into the wilderness, and then they just have them stay there.
Yeah,
they didn't provide any food, they didn't provide any shelter, and they're just like, so everybody that was smart enough to bring food with them is sharing food with their teammates, and to not freeze to death, they're huddling together in groups and sleeping like that. And what they're teaching them is reliance, interdependency, rather than, it's not all about discipline, it's not all about following the rules, it's not all about throwing the knives. There's something more important here.
Yeah, it's great. I'm a sucker for a great military or boot camp novel, and this is certainly that. I don't know how the tactics hold up beyond that, but the boot camp stuff is really fun. I'm not even sure if the boot camp stuff holds up, honestly, today. But one of the other things that I've found interesting in this book is punishment. And the punishment is unusual in that it is, well, in our modern military, you can be punished by having to do push-ups, run laps, or sleep deprivation or extra duty and stuff like that. But here they actually whip people.
Yeah.
And that seems barbaric. And the way Heinlein presents it here, it seems in some ways less barbaric than a lot of the things we do today. The punishment is immediate. It is public. It is instructive, at least from Johnny Rico goes under the lash at one point. And he says, wow, that's a mistake I will never make again.
And in his case, he's given the choice.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He can walk away.
Yeah. Oh, he could quit.
He could quit the military, or he could take the lashes. And,
Yeah.
he made that choice.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he watched someone else get punished with a whipping, and he said it was just really, really difficult to watch. And when it's his turn, he found that it was actually easier to be the one getting whipped than the one watching someone else get whipped, as brutal as it was. So that's interesting. I think we could never do that today. We could never, ever do that today. But I think a punishment that is immediate and visceral is sometimes much more useful and lets people get back to doing whatever it is that they need to be doing, rather than removing them from that situation, or having a cloud hang over their head that they can never restore their former status. Here, as soon as the punishment's over, it's it. Yeah.
Yep. There's no more discussion about it.
Yeah. You're back to full
back
status.
in the fold. So, they get their medical treatment, and then they're returned to duty as soon as they're able.
Yeah. So there's something there. Not advocating for whipping public.
Just on a completely different note here, they spend some time talking about life in a starship. For Heinlein, again, this is kind of sci-fi light. We get a delightful description about the pods dropping, and that's fantastic. And this is just a throwaway. They're talking about moving from here to there on the starships, how fast they can go. And in this particular case, under the Cherenkov drive, she can go Mach 400 or better, so 400 times the speed of light. But I love the fact that he calls his FTL the Cherenkov drive. The idea of Cherenkov radiation has always fascinated me. It travels faster than light. It travels faster than light in a medium, but still, the fact that he, of course, it's Heinlein. Why wouldn't he know that? But the fact that he picked an example of something that we know travels faster than light and use that to label his faster than light drive. Now, again, physicists out there, I understand the difference between speed of light in a vacuum and speed of light in a medium. You don't have to correct me on that one. But isn't that neat? I mean, just that tiny little nod to it.
It's fun to just throw in a word that suggests possibilities without laying the whole thing out. He doesn't develop a whole system of how it works and everything, but just that little spark of the imagination is neat. Yeah.
And on a sidebar to the sidebar, the physicist's name as a Russian physicist was Pavel Cherenkov. And of course, Pavel Chekhov is the navigator on the Enterprise. So.
Aha. Pavel's a pretty common Russian name, though.
Yeah. I like to think that somehow there's a tie between the two worlds.
Here's a quote. So this is one of the classroom scenes. They're talking about whether man has a moral instinct or not, and this is the reason they need some sort of limitation on the franchise, because in fact man does not have a moral instinct. Moral instinct has to be beaten into man by his parents, by society, by the military, whoever. And Johnny Rico says at one point, he's talking about, do you sacrifice one man to save 1,000 men, and some may claim that you've asserted by analogy that one potato is worth the same price, no more or less, as 1,000 potatoes. No, because men are not potatoes. And he says, good, but bring to class tomorrow a written proof in symbolic logic of your answer to my original question. This is a thing, Asimov does this, Heinlein does this, the idea that people can communicate about questions of this level of abstraction in symbolic logic. It's a thing that's throughout the Foundation series that Asimov wrote, is they talk about entire speeches that politicians give being semantically null, as if there's someone just going, oh, look, I ran it through the semantic analyzer and it comes up 0.
I seem to recall at one point they actually brought in a person whose specialty was analyzing the semantic speech and had him chase a politician around. And at the end of the day, it was null. Absolutely no content had been exchanged.
Yeah. And there was just this hope for the future, I think, that one day everyone would just get ultra rational and really think about things. And you take these classes in high school and college called critical thinking, and you learn propositional calculus, and then it just never shows up anywhere ever again unless you're literally working in the fields of philosophy, logic, or mathematics, or physics, or computer science.
Yeah.
So sad. The optimism.
There were a few fun words I picked up out of this. Poltroon.
Poltroon. Oh, that's a word I knew. Yeah.
Yeah, that was not one I'd come across before. And abaft.
Abaft is not one I know.
Yeah, it's a nautical term. It means a
one-
little bit aft.
Oh, okay. That makes
So
sense.
if you're standing in this case, they used it as a reference to bulkhead 30, right? The women on Starship stayed forward of bulkhead 30, and the men
Right.
stayed behind it. But he was saying the kitchen was abaft of bulkhead 30. It means it was immediately aft of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I learned a nautical term there.
That was an interesting choice in the movie. Was they completely integrated the genders? There was no. Carmen was still a combat pilot, but they flipped the sex of one of the mobile infantry, at least one, to being a woman.
Yeah,
and
they wrote in that second female character just to give to make it a love triangle, right? The three-way love triangle between Carmen, who wasn't interested in Johnny, Johnny, who wasn't interested in the other girl, and the other girl who only pined for Johnny.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, they have their moment, and Johnny changes his tune, and then she gets,
Yeah. You're being
bugged.
charitable. I think they changed that character so they could have the shower scene.
They did have the shower scene.
Yeah. Which, I think is there purely because Verhoeven wanted to have naked bodies on screen. But there's something about that, hey, in the future, we're just not going to be prudes about this. And you don't have to separate women from men because we're all sufficiently morally advanced that we can share quarters, we can share showers without it just turning into a nightmare. And that's a kind of that's sort of one of the brighter notes of that particular film, which is unrelentingly dark, I think.
This was a fun moment. And again, this came from basic training, but just this quote: happiness consists in getting enough sleep. Just that, nothing more.
Yes. Here's another quote that I like. They're talking about the vote and why it needs to be limited. The franchise is force, naked and raw, the power of the rods and the axe. Whether it's exerted by 10 men or by 10 billion, political authority is force. And this is something I see sort of a lack of awareness of this in contemporary society as well. All laws are backed up by force. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you make a law, you're saying to someone, you can't do that. And the way we stop you from doing that is force. If you continue to do it, then you're resisting arrest. And then if you continue to resist arrest, then it's just going to just walk your way up the chain. But there's no such thing as a law that is not backed by force. There's no such thing as a law which is just a suggestion. And here, all political authority also is not, it's not a suggestion. It's a population exerting their will over another population. Yeah. Hopefully with good intention, but that's, an orthogonal concern. So
I think we've jumped into the non sequitur section of the of the analysis here. Heinlein, for me in general, it's rare to read a passage and just think, wow, that's beautiful. He has nice stories, but his wordsmithing doesn't usually grab me. But this was something I highlighted just because I thought it was beautiful, beautifully written anyway. Two others were there, Cadets Hassan and Bird. Hassan the assassin was the oldest man in our class and looked like something a fisherman had let out of a bottle, while Birdie wasn't much bigger than a sparrow and about as intimidating. That is just so descriptive.
That is neat, yes. I don't know that I would categorize that as beautiful, but it's certainly economical. He's very, very evocative with just a handful of words.
Yeah. Something a fisherman would have let out of a bottle. Not anybody, not any bottle, but something a fisherman would have had in a bottle.
Yeah, well, a bottle presumably that he fished out of the sea. Yeah. I like the nickname, and this is something I hadn't noticed before when I was reading, Hassan the Assassin. So he's got this sort of multicultural cast, and the nickname there, do you know who Hassani Saba was?
I do not.
He is the origin, or one of the presumed origins of the term assassin. He is someone who elevated assassination to a fine art, He recruited people. He made them ruthlessly loyal to him by preying on the belief in an afterlife in primarily Muslim population. He said, yeah, if you die in my service, you'll be transported immediately to heaven, and you will live in ecstasy with 72 virgins and all of that, all the stuff that's promised in the Quran. He made it real. He would recruit someone, he would drug them unbeknownst to them. They would wake up in a place surrounded by gorgeous women, high on opium, and then when they came down, he would transport them back to their quarters and say, hey, that's just a taste of the afterlife. And so they believed it. So one of the things he would do to demonstrate his power to like visiting kings is he would say, okay, you see that man standing on the battlements up there? And the guy would go, yeah. He would point at the man, snap his fingers, and the man would leap to his death. Eagerly.
Okay, they stole that from Conan the Barbarian.
No. Conan stole it from this historical figure. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah, it's a remarkable story.
No, that's fun.
Yeah. Sidebar, total tangent. Worth mentioning, this book won a Hugo Award the year that it came out.
I wonder how many Hugos he's won.
Oh, 6 if you include retro Hugos. Do you know about retro Hugos?
I was just sitting there chewing on that. Is that a posthumous Hugo or?
It's a Hugo Award. So before they had, I'm not sure when the Hugo Awards started, but I think he was writing before Hugo Awards were being awarded. And so in any given year, in any given Worldcon, they can reach back to a year when the Hugos didn't exist and retroactively award a retro Hugo to someone who is not eligible at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's won 2 of those, 2 retro Hugos.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Heinlein won the most Hugos for Best Novel and had the most nominations. 6 wins on 12 nominations.
He sets a high bar, no doubt.
He really does. He's thoughtful. He's interesting. He's so much fun to read. He's definitely ornery, and I know he rubs people the wrong way. And I get it. And I would never force Heinlein on anyone because he's just a very particular thing, especially now. It's just like he feels really retrogressive. But damn is he fun. Yeah. So
I'm sure this is not our last visit to Heinlein.
No, Tunnel in the Sky is on my list for some time down the road.
All right. Well, anything else on this one?
Nothing else on this I can think of.
Yeah, I've got other highlights and notes, but nothing really substantive. All right. Well, then, that begs the question of what are we doing next?
Next, we're going to do a novel by Joe Haldeman, but not the one you would think. We are not doing The Forever War. We are doing a book called Camouflage, which just recently crossed the threshold. It was published in 1994. It's officially 20 years old, so it qualifies as yesterday. So have that to look forward to in 2 weeks.
All right. Well, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.